Now that Big Red is on the road, we don't have to worry about that. We're gonna move on to the C10s. Oh, and the Camaro, maybe eventually. Who cares about that Camaro, right? I think, here, I'm gonna be real. I think the Camaro gets the least amount of views across all the other cars we have on the channel. I'm just saying. I think you'd have to double check on that one. So let's get some stuff moved out of the way. We have a lot of things in the way and we'll get started on this.
So today we are gonna be working on the C10. It's a good old C10. We're gonna install this rear end into it.
Well, what's C10?
Well, we're not working on this one. We're pushing this one out of the way. This is in the way, hold on. We're working on this C10, silly. We can't put a rear end in that one. So if you remember, we talked about before, we got this rear end here from good old 67 Dave. We got a little close to the Camaro over there, so we're gonna skedoodle it over a little bit. We gotta get the front end. This front end is actually for this truck, and that is the exhaust for the Camaro. So we're gonna put the exhaust over there for the Camaro. This is very exhausting. Exhaust pipe.
Hey, funny guy, I got a joke for you. Bam, bop, bada bop, boom, pow.
You hear that?
So that's why we're changing the rear. Well, that's one of the reasons why we're changing the rear end. That noise is the rear brakes. You ought to hear it driving down the road. It is horrific.
It's stupid.
It is horrific. Oh, sorry, sir. Yeah, I think that'll do the trick. They don't even make this tire anymore. Well, this size. Can give you a little idea what it sounds like going down the road. This is a rear end that came with the truck. I don't know if it's not original to the truck. So it has Moser axles. I'm pretty sure these are the CPP. They're big brake kit that we've had nothing but problems with. And you can see a lot of it is because of this. It doesn't really locate on here. And it started out that the rotor, you can't really tell now because it's been sitting and rusting. The rotor was hitting the caliper bracket on the inside here because you would put this on here and it would hang like this, so it would be egg-shaped, be out around. So then you put the wheel on there and tighten it down, and this would spin like an egg, and it would come around and it hit the caliper bracket. So that's what started, I thought was the noise. It was one thing after another. And then they said the last thing was the brake pads. They said the brake pads that come with it are a cheap, noisy brake pad, and I got these ones that are supposed to be quiet, and it got louder. So between the brakes and the little ear here for the panhard, and this rear end is not all nice and powder coated like the other one. This thing never had a parking brake in it, but when I did the calipers, you know, it came with the parking brake cables, and you can see it's ran up here. The parking brake cables here aren't gonna work with the new rear end. So I'm gonna start by taking the cables out. Gotta get a bolt out here. This is the original, this is where the parking brake, original parking brake cables are gonna be. These are just different cable because we have calipers now instead of a drum, so it just has a clip. So now I'm gonna do the brake line. The brake line has been different, it's been changed in this because it's still braided now. Well, Russell doesn't make a brake kit for this. So the brake kit I got on here is, I think it's the square body ones. It's a 73 up. I'm gonna redo the whole brake lines. So I have a vacuum plug that I'm gonna seal it up right now so it just doesn't drip and keep leaking all the fluid out of the master cylinder. This brake line and bracket and everything is different than the factory deal. I welded a bracket on here to hold this brake line because, like I said, this is for the square bodies. Now I'm gonna take the panhard bar off here. This one has been changed a little bit. It's got an adjuster on both sides. So we're gonna reuse this because it helps center the rear end in here when you can adjust it. So I got the bolt out of the frame side here, and I'm gonna pry it down, and the body's, it's gonna move a little bit, so be careful. Now I can get it off the rear end, because the rear end side has a stud. So now that I got the brake line undone, and the panhard out of the way, we already have the drive line out of it when we pulled the engine and tranny, so we don't have to deal with that. So now I'm gonna lower the rear end, and I'm gonna let the springs hold the trailing arms, so I could take the U-bolts off here to get the rear end out. So we're gonna come down slow. We'll try it right there. Now this is a nice part, because now we have the impact. The shocks are on the bracket, so they're not gonna do anything, so they'll come loose. our shock out of the way here. You gotta be careful because the pinion's trying to fall here and rotate off the jack.
Ready when you are, boss.
Oh, it's really trying to twist now. All right, now we're free. Actually, you know what? I think you should reposition the jack because it's really trying to rotate out. Why don't you set it down? Come down a little bit more. Set it back onto the trailing arms. Come on down with it.
A few moments later.
Hold on. Come towards you. Pull the jack. Oh, easy because you're guessing. I gotta go. I have to go like this and drop it past.
There you have it, folks.
You're gonna have to take the jack all the way to the driver's side and come out sideways if you can. And here it is. The old rear end.
Give the people back home a rundown how this rear end was before and the changes you did to it.
This is the panhard bracket I was talking about that somebody added. When we got the truck, this had a posi in it. And if I remember correctly, it was a 373 posi. Drum brake. So the gear ratio was too low in it. We added the overdrive and it was still, in our opinion, too low of a gear ratio. So then I got a new posi. So it has an Auburn posi in it and now it has a 342 gear. And then when I did that, I added the Mosier axle. When I did the axles, then I did a different disc brake. I didn't really care for the other disc brakes, which I think I should have kept because they were quieter and actually worked better than these ones. So then I got the CPP here. These are their version of the big brakes. So we ran it like that. It was okay for the most part. It would make noise every now and then. After, I think I must have had it just in the right spot, like I showed before, that this rotor's not really located on there. Then CPP, of course, blamed Mosier, saying Mosier didn't make their axles to the right size, and then Mosier says that, you know, that's the size they make all the axles, so went back and forth. So we decided we're gonna solve it, get rid of the whole thing. The rear end cover is kind of leaking a little bit, so we have a Mosier cover the same as this one that we were going to put on it, but now we're just gonna sell it with it. So the difference between the two is obviously this is a factory rear end. It has a casting on it. This one is powder coated, and I TIGged the axle housings. So you can see on this one, they kind of seep a little bit. So that's why this pretty much is just sealing. It adds a little strength, but it pretty much is just sealing the axle tube to the center so you don't get that little seep out of there. This has a smaller U-joint, or pinion yoke on it, I mean, for the smaller U-joints. And then this one has the bigger guy. We bought these brakes for this rear end. We have the same kit. These are Dave's. Dave had this complete, but he's gonna use these brakes on his next rear end. The only difference is between the two is we have black calipers and his is red. So we're just gonna take the calipers off, put them in the box with the brakes that we have for this, a brand new box. And then if you look at it here, the welds that they did on this perch here is not too exciting. So when we start adding some power to this thing, you're gonna have a thought in the back of your head about ripping those spring purchases.
Man, half that one's not even welded on.
Yeah, but one of the problems that we just kind of found out is that the factory rear end is actually narrower than this rear end. That one's 1.5 inches narrower than this one.
That's really something.
Both same carrier, same gear, both 342. I actually like 342. 342 work really good in this truck or just in general with a 4-speed. You can drive the freeway, and then if you have, you know, decent horsepower, it moves out just fine. So we like 342 seems to work good in this truck. So we're keeping the same gear ratio. We also took the sway bar off. These trucks, I don't know if you're familiar with them. This style here, a lot of people put the sway bar underneath the trailing arms. It looks a little weird. I don't know if the functions really works out, but we're gonna be changing it on this one. We have the sway bar that goes up top. It's like a solid bar with the solid ends. It's not like this style. It's more like the spline deals. It's not spline, no. I had the same problem last time I tried to explain it. It's another part that we're getting from Dave. So the sway bar, it's anti-roll, I guess you would call it, but it moves it up top. So it has little in links. It's not a bushing in link. It's like a Heim in link, and it goes through the trailing arms, and then it has a little bracket that welds on the inside. That being said, now we're going to install the new rear end. So we got the rear end in here. Thing looks, man, this thing's amazing. This rear end this thing is so nice with the silver powder coat. Man, it looks good. But once you know it though, we already ran into our first problem. So we tried to put the panhard in it. You know, I want to put it in first, and then I was gonna put the tires on it and get the rear end centered up. And because of this Mosier the rear end cover, with the girdles in it, it's bigger, and now it's hitting. Well, right now it's not hitting, but I got this nut barely on here. Only a couple threads. It does have the lock washer and a flat washer, but still, it's barely on there. And I got it slid all the way back against the nut, and it's barely missing it. But if we were to drive this thing and hit a bump, the rear end would come up and it would hit. So I'm gonna have to make a new panhard. I'm gonna probably have this side non-adjustable and then have it come up and then it bend like a 45 or so, 35 degree, and then come straight over the top of the rear end over here. Probably have a Heim on this side. So I have a little adjustment to kick it back as much as possible to give this rear end some room, but not too bad. Everything else went smooth. So let's see what it looks like with the wheels on it now. It still looks amazing.
Is it cold in here, or is it just me?
But because of the rear end being narrower, now the rear track is narrower than the front. Inch narrower track than the front. They don't make these in a 9, this wheel. They make it in a 10, but I can't remember the offset. So if we can fit a 10 on here, it'd be nice to go to a bigger wheel tire combination in the back, but we can't really go more on the inside, so it'd have to be 2 inches out, and I think 2 inches out would be too wide. If we can't get it in a 9, we're not gonna change the wheel. So we might just go to a half-inch spacer, a solid aluminum, kind of like we did on the 62. A couple problems, you know, you're always gonna run into problems changing stuff around. We're gonna lower this fine automobile back down. We'll put it on the ground here. Back as a roller now. Bam!
I think I just heard the panhard bar hit.
You did not.
Ever since you put this rear end in my truck, the panhard bar hits.
Well, I can take it back out if you want. You guys make sure you like, share, subscribe. You come on back. You see the progress on this thing. We'll see you next time.